The loom clattered in rhythm with my heartbeat. 14 hours into the shift, and my fingers had gone numb an hour ago. The blessing and the curse of textile work. You stop feeling the cuts eventually. Stop noticing the blood that seeped into the rough hemp threads and stained them darker than any dye could manage. The same blood that marked me as low-born, as disposable, as exactly the kind of worker who could be replaced tomorrow if she slowed down or complained or did anything except pull the threads through the frame. Back and forth, back and forth. The same motion my mother had taught me when I was 7, back when we still lived in the merchant quarter, back when father was still father, and not just another gambling addict who'd destroyed everything he touched. The factory floor stretched endless around me. 40 looms, 40 workers, all of us moving in synchronized silence because talking slowed production, and slowed production meant reduced wages. The air tasted like lint and sweat and the particular despair of people who measured their lives in copper coins and 14-hour days. My supervisor walked the rows with his ledger, checking output, making notes. His face never changed whether you were ahead of quota or behind. Same flat expression, same dead eyes. 20 years at this job had carved all the humanity out of him and left only the machine. My name is Aria Wren, 22 years old, unmated, poor, invisible. The kind of invisible that comes from having your family name stripped of meaning. The Wrens had been textile merchants for 3 generations. Modest wealth, modest respect. Then my father discovered cards and dice and the particular poison of thinking the next hand would fix everything. It never did. 5 years of watching him spiral, 2 years of collectors at our door. Then one morning they found him in the river. The official report said accident. Everyone knew better. When a man owes money to the kind of people my father owed money to, rivers become convenient. Mother and I kept the pendant. Everything else went to pay debts that weren't even ours. The house, the shop, the cart, my mother's wedding jewelry, everything except the silver wolf pendant her grandmother had passed down. We'd hidden it in the flour bin. Even the collectors weren't thorough enough to sift through 50 pounds of grain. Now Mother lay in our single room above the bakery. Wasting sickness, the physician called it. I called it poverty. The medicine that might help cost more than I made in 3 months. So I worked the loom 14 hours a day and watched her fade and tried not to think about the mating ceremony tomorrow night. The ceremony happened every 5 years when the moon hung full and red. Some religious significance I'd never bothered to learn. What mattered was simple. Get chosen by a male and you had protection, status, security. Go unchosen and you had another 5 years of this. Of watching people cross the street to avoid you because poverty might be contagious. Of former friends like Celeste and Maya who suddenly couldn't remember your name. I'd gone to the last ceremony. 17 years old. Too young still. Too uncertain. I'd stood in the back and watched every girl around me get selected while I remained alone. 5 years ago. It felt like 50. The bell rang. End of shift. My supervisor nodded without meeting my eyes. I collected my coin. 12 copper. Enough for bread and oil. Maybe some fish if the market stalls had anything left. I walked home through streets that smelled like smoke and sewage and the particular desperation of people who worked themselves to death and called it living. Mother was awake when I entered, propped against the wall because we couldn't afford pillows. Her face had the gray quality that meant bad day. The coughing had blood in it now. "Did you eat?" I asked. "Not hungry." "You need to eat. Save the coin," her voice rattled. "You need a dress for tomorrow." "I have a dress. That old blue thing." She tried to smile. Failed. "You deserve better." "I deserve what I can afford, which is the old blue thing." She reached for my hand. Her skin felt like paper, like she might tear if I held too tight. "Your grandmother's pendant. Wear it tomorrow, for luck." "Luck!" I couldn't keep the bitterness out. "Right. Aria." Her eyes held that look, the one that said she was about to say something I didn't want to hear. "If someone chooses you tomorrow, anyone, even if you don't like him, say yes." My throat closed. "Mother, please, I need to know you'll be safe after I'm gone." "You're not going anywhere. We both know better." She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "Promise me, say yes, no matter who asks." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her I'd rather die alone than tie myself to some stranger for the sake of security. But I looked at her gray face and her bloody cough and her paper skin, and I lied. "I promise." She relaxed back against the wall. "Good girl. Now tell me about your day. Did anything interesting happen? Nothing interesting ever happened, but I told her about the loom and the thread and the way the sunset had painted the factory windows gold. Small things, boring things, the kind of details that filled the space between us and the inevitable. We talked until she fell asleep. Then I sat in the dark and held the wolf pendant and wondered what fresh hell tomorrow would bring. The ceremonial hall smelled like pine resin and expectation. They'd burned it in iron bowls along the stone walls. Some tradition about purifying the space. All it did was make my eyes water and my throat close. I stood near the back where the unmated females gathered. 50 of us, maybe more, all wearing our best dresses and desperate smiles, pretending we didn't care who chose us, pretending this wasn't the most important night of our lives. My dress was blue, pale blue that had maybe been pretty 5 years ago. Now it just looked faded, like me. I'd pinned my blonde hair up the way Mother had taught me. Simple, neat, nothing fancy. The pendant hung against my collarbone, hidden under the neckline, a secret promise to women I'd never met. Celeste stood 3 bodies away, dark hair, confident posture, the kind of beauty that came from never missing meals. She wore green silk that probably cost more than our room. She caught me looking and smiled. The smile said everything. Poor Arya. Still here, still hoping, still invisible. They say the selection will be competitive this year, Maya said to Celeste. Loud enough for me to hear, always loud enough. Lots of merchant sons, even a few warriors. I heard Lord Valen's son might attend, Celeste replied, from the Eastern Valley Pack. Apparently he's looking for someone refined. The barb landed exactly where she'd aimed it. Refined. I was many things. Too quiet, too poor, too ordinary. But refined had never been among them. The drums started. Deep bass that vibrated through the stone floor. The unmated males entered through the opposite doors. I recognized most of them. Farmers' sons, merchants, a few craftsmen. Their eyes scanned the room with varying degrees of interest. Some girls pushed forward. Others, like me, tried to disappear into the walls. Elder Thomas stood at the front, ancient and weathered and probably older than the building itself. He raised his hands. The drums stopped. His voice boomed across the hall in the old tongue. Words about destiny and moonlight and sacred bonds. I'd heard it all 5 years ago. I stopped listening. The matching process started. Males stepped forward, approaching females they'd been watching. Some pairings were expected. Childhood friends who'd been circling each other for years. Others surprised the crowd, drawing gasps and excited whispers. Maya was chosen within minutes by a warrior whose name I couldn't remember. Celeste had 2 males approach her. She chose the taller one with a perfectly practiced expression of delighted surprise. The crowd thinned. The unchosen females grew quieter, our collective hope dimming like candles in wind. I became aware of how cold my hands were, how the smoke made everything blur at the edges, how nobody had looked at me once, not once, just like last time. Then the temperature dropped. Every conversation died. Every head turned. The doors had opened again. But these weren't farmers or merchants. These were something else entirely. 3 figures entered, and even from the back of the hall I could feel the power radiating from them like heat from a forge. Wolves, my mind supplied, apex predators. The one in front made my breath catch. He was tall, broader than any male I'd ever seen, moving with a predatory grace that made something ancient and instinctive coil tight in my belly. Dark hair fell across a face carved from shadow and stone, his jaw sharp enough to cut. His eyes, even from this distance, burned with an intensity that made me want to look away and never stop looking simultaneously. He wore black, simple but clearly expensive, and he moved like violence contained in human form. Holy gods, someone breathed beside me. Is that? It can't be, another voice hissed. Why would he come to a provincial ceremony? The whispers grew frantic, excited, terrified. Names were spoken in tones usually reserved for prayers or curses. I caught fragments. King, Northern Peaks, Lycan. My head felt light. The smoke seemed thicker suddenly. The man's eyes swept the room with cold assessment, passing over faces like a blade over wheat, dismissive, searching. His 2 companions flanked him, one with copper hair and an easy smile that didn't reach his eyes, another darker, quieter, watching everything with the stillness of a coiled snake. They were clearly high-ranking, clearly dangerous, clearly other in ways that made every wolf in the room instinctively lower their gaze, except I couldn't look away. The dark-haired one continued his scan. Girls pushed forward now, suddenly brave or stupid enough to catch his attention. Celeste had somehow repositioned herself to the front, her chosen mate forgotten, her expression transformed into something sultry and inviting. But those burning eyes passed over her without pausing, passed over all of them, and landed on me. The world tilted. I felt it like a physical touch, his gaze finding me in the back shadows where I'd tried so hard to disappear. Every nerve in my body ignited. Pain lanced through my skull. My hearing sharpened until I could count individual heartbeats in the crowd. Smell intensified. Pine resin, yes, but also leather and steel and something wild and winter cold that made my wolf pendant burn against my skin. The mate bond, some distant part of my mind whispered. The thing that happened in stories. The thing that happened to other people. Important people. Powerful people. Not textile workers with debts and dying mothers. His expression changed. Something flickered across those brutal features. Surprise, perhaps. Or recognition, though we'd never met. Couldn't have met. I was nobody, and he was the room spun harder. I realized distantly that I couldn't breathe properly, that the heat and the smoke and the sheer impossible weight of his attention had pushed me past some invisible threshold. My vision tunneled. The floor seemed to rise up to meet me. I heard Celeste's sharp intake of breath, Maya's startled gasp, then nothing. I woke to voices, low, tense, arguing. She could be a plant. The voice was male, unfamiliar, hard. The bond doesn't lie. That was him, the man from the ceremony. His voice was rougher up close, edged with something that might have been concern or might have been anger. The bond can be manufactured. A different male voice, older. We've seen it before. Not like this. Him again. I felt it the moment our eyes met. She felt it too. That's why she collapsed. Or she's an excellent actress. My eyes opened. I was in a room I didn't recognize. Stone walls, no windows, a single door with heavy bolts. The furniture was sparse, functional. This wasn't a guest room. This was a cell. A comfortable cell, but a cell nonetheless. 3 men stood near the door. The dark-haired one from the ceremony. The copper-haired companion. And a third man I hadn't seen before. Older, scarred. The kind of scars that came from blades, not accidents. They noticed I was awake. All 3 heads turned. The dark-haired one moved first, crossing the room in 3 strides. He didn't kneel, didn't soften, just stood there looking down at me with those storm-gray eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Arya." My throat felt raw. "Arya Wren." "Who sent you?" The question hit like cold water. "What? Who sent you to the ceremony?" He leaned closer, not threatening exactly, but not gentle either. "What do you know about Eastern Valley spies?" Understanding dawned slowly. They thought I was part of something, some plot. "Nobody sent me. I work at the textile factory. I went to the ceremony because I'm unmated and 22 and running out of options." Convenient story. That was the scarred man. Low-born girl, no prospects. Suddenly catches the king's eye. Very convenient. King. The words settled into my chest like lead. I looked at the dark-haired man with new understanding. The power. The guards, the fact that we were in what was clearly a safe house, not a residence. "I don't know anything about spies," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear crawling up my spine. "I don't know anything about Eastern Valley except that they grow wheat and have too much money. I work 14-hour shifts at a loom. My mother is dying of wasting sickness. I have neither the time nor the education to plot against anyone." Very convincing. The copper-haired man spoke for the first time. His voice was lighter than the others, but no less dangerous. Almost believable. "It's the truth." I sat up slowly. The room spun, but I forced it to steady. "I can give you references, work records, financial statements proving exactly how poor we are." "Which proves nothing," the scarred man said. "Poor people make excellent spies. They're motivated." "Then verify it." Anger was replacing fear now. Good. Anger I could use. "Ask my supervisor. Ask the bakery owner we rent from. Ask the physician who's been treating my mother with medicine we can't afford. Ask anyone. I'm exactly what I appear to be. Nobody." The king studied me, those gray eyes cataloging every detail, every micro-expression, looking for the lie. I stared back. Let him look. I had nothing to hide except poverty, and that was already visible. "The mate bond doesn't lie," he said again, speaking to his companions now, not to me. "I felt it. She felt it. That's real." "Bonds can be manufactured," the scarred man repeated, "with the right herbs, the right preparation. We've seen it in intelligence reports. Not like this." The king's jaw tightened. "I know the difference between chemistry and destiny." "Do you?" The copper-haired man's voice was gentle, almost kind. "Because 3 months ago, you would have said mate bonds were myths, stories for children. Now you're ready to trust a stranger because of feelings?" The king didn't answer, just kept looking at me, like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. "Give me 30 days, he said finally. "Let me verify the bond is real, verify you're who you claim to be." "And if I refuse?" I asked. "You can't." His voice was flat, final. "You felt the bond too, which means you're either my mate or someone's weapon. Either way, you're in danger now. My enemies will target you. Here you're protected." "Protected?" I looked around the cell. "Is that what this is?" "Yes." No apology in his voice, just fact. "I need to know if you're part of an assassination plot. I need alibis, references, financial records, everything you just offered to provide, and I need time to see if the bond deepens or fades. And my mother?" The words came out sharper than intended. "She needs medicine I can't afford. She needs care. If I'm locked in here for 30 days, she'll die alone in that room." Something flickered in his eyes. "If you cooperate, if you're innocent, your mother gets the best medical care available. Your debt's cleared. Room in the royal residence with actual physicians, not charlatans selling false hope." I stared at him, at this king who'd just offered me everything I'd prayed for while simultaneously treating me like a threat. The practical part of my mind that had kept us alive these past 3 years started calculating. 30 days, medical care, debt forgiveness. Even if nothing came of the bond, even if he decided I was nobody after all, Mother would have treatment. That was worth any price. "Okay," I said, 30 days, but I want my mother moved here tomorrow, and I want to see the physician's credentials before I agree to anything." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair terms." "I'm not an idiot," I said. "Poor doesn't mean stupid." "No." He straightened. "It doesn't. I'm Cale Northraven. This is Marcus Stone, my beta, and Dante Cross, head of security. You'll be seeing a lot of them over the next month." "Lucky me," I said dryly. This time he did smile, small, brief, but real. "We'll see." They left. The door bolted behind them. I sat in the cell that wasn't quite a cell and tried to process everything. Mate bond. King. 30 days. My mother would live. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. The next day, they brought Mother to the residence. Not the cell. An actual room with windows and sunlight and a bed soft enough to sink into. The physician was older, competent-looking. He examined her with gentle hands and asked questions that proved he actually knew his craft. "Wasting sickness is manageable," he said after the examination. "With proper nutrition and the right herbs. She'll never be fully healthy, but she can have years instead of months." Years. The word made my throat close. "Thank you." He nodded and left. Mother looked at me from the bed, color already returning to her cheeks, just from 1 day of rest and decent food. "What did you do?" she asked quietly. "Made a deal." "With who?" "A king." She absorbed this. "The mate bond? Maybe. Or maybe just desperation." I sat on the edge of the bed. "But you're alive. That's enough." Her hand found mine, stronger already than yesterday. "Be careful, Arya. Men in power don't make deals without expecting something in return." "I know." I squeezed her fingers. "But right now he's expecting answers, not anything I can't give. And in 30 days, if he decides I'm nobody, we'll still have had 30 days of you being alive and fed and cared for. That's worth it." She didn't argue, just held my hand and we sat together in the sunlight neither of us had seen in far too long. The first week was testing, constant, thorough, exhausting. Dante verified my story, sent agents to interview my supervisor, the bakery owner, the physician who'd been treating Mother on credit he knew he'd never collect. Every detail checked and cross-referenced. I provided financial records from Father's ledgers, the ones showing his descent from successful merchant to desperate gambler, the debt notices, the collector warnings, everything. "You kept excellent records," Dante said on day 3. sitting across from me in a small office, his scarred face unreadable. Most people in your situation would have burned the evidence. My father taught me accounting before the gambling took him, I said. Numbers don't lie. I wanted to remember that, to remember what happens when you stop paying attention to truth. He studied me. The records check out. You're exactly who you claim to be. I know. That doesn't mean you're safe. He leaned forward slightly. If the bond is real, you're valuable, which makes you a target. If the bond is false, you're a weapon, which makes you a threat. Either way, you need to learn how to not die. Encouraging, I said. I don't do encouragement. I do survival. He stood. Tomorrow morning, training yard. We'll see what you're made of. The training was brutal. Dante didn't coddle or soften. He treated me like he'd treat any recruit, which meant I spent most of the first session on my back in the dirt, wondering if my ribs were broken or just badly bruised. You're too slow, he said, standing over me, not offering a hand up. And you telegraph every move. Again. I got up, got knocked down, got up, got knocked down. By the end of the hour, I was bleeding from my lip and pretty sure my shoulder was dislocated, but I'd landed one hit. One, right to his solar plexus. It hadn't even made him flinch, but I'd landed it. Better, he said. Not good, but better. Same time tomorrow. Cale observed the council sessions from a distance. I wasn't allowed to participate. Just watch and listen and learn. 3 factions became clear within days. Lady Morgana Ashford led the traditionalists, older nobles who believed in bloodlines and proper alliances. She looked at me like I was a stain on expensive fabric, something to be cleaned away. Then there were Lord Valen's ambassadors, Eastern Valley representatives pushing for an alliance marriage between Kael and Valen's daughter. They were polite to me, perfectly polite, the kind of polite that made it clear I was beneath their notice. Elder Thomas led the moderates, the wait-and-see faction. He nodded to me once, just once, but it felt like acknowledgement, like maybe I wasn't completely invisible here. On the 5th evening, Kael found me in the small library. I'd been reading treaty documents, trying to understand the political landscape. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. Why does Valen want you married to his daughter? I asked, before he could say whatever he'd come to say. What does he gain? He blinked, surprised. You read the treaties? You left them on the table. I thought I was supposed to learn. I set down the parchment. Your treasury reports show declining silver production. That's why you attended a provincial ceremony, isn't it? Seeking a cheaper alliance than what Valen offers? Something changed in his expression. You read the treasury reports too? You left them in the same stack as the treaties. Those were supposed to be confidential. Then maybe don't leave them lying around. I met his eyes. So am I right? Was the ceremony about finding a political solution that didn't involve selling yourself to Eastern Valley? He moved into the room, sat in the chair across from mine. Yes, Valen wants access to our mountain passes, control of trade routes, an alliance through marriage gives him that without conquest. But you don't want to give it to him. I don't want to be controlled. His jaw tightened. My father spent his whole reign navigating between Eastern Valley's wealth and Southern Coast's naval power, always playing them against each other, never quite belonging to either. I won't be a puppet. So you went looking for a mate among your own people, someone who wouldn't come with political strings. Yes. And found me instead. I smiled without humor. Congratulations. You got exactly what you didn't want, a complication. Maybe. He leaned back. Or maybe I got exactly what I needed. Someone who reads treaty documents and asks sharp questions, someone who thinks instead of just reacting. Don't. I held up a hand. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm a textile worker who happens to be good with numbers. That doesn't make me qualified for politics. No, he agreed, but it makes you educable, and education is worth more than bloodlines. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he stood. Tomorrow night there's a state dinner. Eastern Valley ambassadors, including Valen's daughter, Lady Seraphine. I want you there. Why? Because if the bond is real, I need to see how it holds up under pressure, and she is very good at applying pressure. Another test. Everything is a test. He moved toward the door, paused. But for what it's worth, you're passing. After he left, I sat in the empty library and tried to ignore how my chest tightened at those last words. This wasn't romance, this was survival. For both of us. The mate bond was just biology, chemistry, nothing more. I almost believed it. The state dinner was held in a hall that made the mating ceremony room look like a closet. Crystal chandeliers, gold inlaid walls, servants in formal livery moving between tables with military precision. I wore a borrowed dress, deep burgundy that Kael's sister Lyra had selected. It fit better than my blue one, made me look almost like I belonged. I didn't belong. Lady Seraphine made that clear within 5 minutes. She was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Perfect features, perfect posture, perfect education. Everything about her screamed refinement and breeding and suitability for queenship. "So you're the provincial girl everyone's whispering about." Her smile was sharp. "How fascinating. I've always wondered what it would be like to live in such simple circumstances." "It's exactly like living in complex circumstances," I said, "except with less money." Kael coughed into his wine. Lyra grinned. Marcus, who was seated nearby, looked like he was trying not to laugh. Seraphine's smile tightened. "Well, at least you have a sense of humor. That must make the poverty more bearable." Actually, the humor is what makes dealing with condescending nobles bearable. The table went quiet. Lady Morgana looked like she'd swallowed glass. The Eastern Valley ambassadors were frozen in various stages of outrage. Kael set down his wineglass carefully. "Lady Seraphine," he said. His voice was pleasant. Too pleasant. "Perhaps you'd like to share with us the innovative agricultural reforms your father has implemented in Eastern Valley. I understand they've increased wheat yields by 30%. It was a clear redirect, an olive branch. Seraphine took it gratefully and launched into a detailed explanation that proved she was educated and intelligent and absolutely perfect for political alliance. I listened with half my attention. The other half was focused on the servers moving through the room. One in particular, the head server, older man, weathered face. He was pouring wine with his left hand. That was wrong. I'd worked service jobs before the textile factory. You learned quickly. Right-handed people pour right-handed. It's natural. Automatic. This server was pouring left-handed, but when he'd set down the pitcher, I'd seen him reach for it with his right. Injured? No. His movements were too smooth for injury. Replacement? Possibly. But why would they replace the head server for a routine dinner? I caught Dante's eye. He was stationed near the wall, always watching. I made a small gesture, pointed at the server with my eyes. Dante's gaze sharpened. He saw it too. The server approached our table, wine pitcher in his left hand, face carefully neutral. He moved towards Seraphine's glass. Everything about the motion looked normal, practiced, perfect. Except he was pouring wrong. Dante moved, fast, crossing the room in heartbeats. The server's hand went to his belt, not for a cloth, for steel. Then everything happened at once. The blade appeared, 6 inches of silver that caught the chandelier light and turned it into something deadly. The server lunged not at Kael but at Seraphine. His form was perfect, professional. This wasn't some desperate amateur. This was a trained killer. Screams erupted, nobles diving for cover, chairs scraping, crystals shattering. Dante intercepted. His scarred hand caught the server's wrist mid-thrust. The silver blade carved a line across Dante's forearm, deep enough that I saw bone beneath the blood. He didn't even flinch, just twisted, hard. The sound of breaking wrist echoed through the sudden chaos. Marcus was already moving. I'd never seen a shift happen in real time. It was brutal, beautiful, terrifying. His bones cracked and reformed, skin rippled, fur erupted like dark water flowing upstream. The transformation took maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds, and then a massive wolf the size of a horse was airborne. His wolf form hit a second attacker I hadn't even seen. The man's scream cut off when 200 pounds of apex predator slammed him into the marble floor. Blood sprayed. Marcus's jaws found the attacker's throat. Kael was on his feet, pulling me back, shielding me with his body. His hand was iron around my wrist, protective, possessive. I couldn't see past his shoulders, couldn't see the third attacker until he was already moving, coming at us from the side, silver blade in his hand, murder in his eyes. I grabbed the wine carafe from the table, heavy crystal that cost more than I made in a year. My textile worker hands knew weight, knew trajectory, knew exactly how to throw for maximum impact. I didn't think, just acted, hurled the carafe with every ounce of strength I had. It hit his temple. Perfect strike. Crystal exploded. Wine and blood and glass fragments painted the wall behind him. He staggered, eyes rolling. Kael's fist finished the job. One punch, clean, precise. The attacker's head snapped back, and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The fight was over in seconds, but it felt like hours. When the dust settled, 3 attackers were down. Dante was bleeding but standing. Marcus's wolf form had one of them pinned, and Seraphine was unconscious. The silver blade had grazed her shoulder. Just a graze, but silver to werewolf flesh might as well have been poison. "Get the physician," Cale ordered. His voice was cold, controlled. "And take them to the cells. I want answers." The servants scattered. Dante's team secured the attackers. Marcus shifted back to human form, naked and blood-covered but very much alive. Someone threw him a cloak. He wrapped it around his waist and grinned at me. "Nice throw. Nice teeth," I replied. My hands were shaking. I shoved them behind my back. Cale turned to me. "You saw him, before Dante did. He was pouring wrong. Pouring wrong. Left-handed when he was naturally right-handed. Small thing, but wrong." I met his eyes. "I noticed details. It's what happens when you spend 14 hours a day at a loom. You see patterns. That pattern just saved lives." He touched my face, gentle, quick, then pulled back like he'd been burned. "Are you hurt?" "No." I was lying. My shoulder hurt where I'd thrown the carafe. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but compared to everyone else, I was fine. "I'm okay." The interrogation took 3 hours. I wasn't allowed in the room, but I heard pieces through the walls. The attackers were Northern Peak wolves, not outsiders, hired by someone within Kael's own court. Their target had been Seraphine. The goal was to frame Eastern Valley, start a war, create chaos. When Kael finally emerged, his face was carved from ice. "My father was assassinated," he said, speaking to Marcus and Dante and Lyra. Not to me, but I was close enough to hear. 10 years ago, they made it look natural, heart failure. But these are the same people, the same faction, still trying to destabilize the throne. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked quietly. "I suspected. Lady Morgana suspected. But we had no proof." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "Tonight, we have proof." "What will you do?" Lyra asked. "Find every last one of them." His eyes were winter cold. "And make sure they understand what happens when you threaten my family." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "You saw the attack coming. You acted without hesitation. You saved lives tonight, Arya." "I threw a wine carafe. That's not exactly heroic." "You kept your head when everyone else panicked. That is exactly heroic." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell the winter pine scent, feel the heat radiating from him. "Now you see what you're walking into. This isn't romance. This isn't a fairy tale. This is survival. My enemies will try to kill anyone I care about, anyone who matters. If you stay, you become a target." I thought about my mother sleeping peacefully in a real bed for the first time in years. I thought about the way Kael had shielded me with his body without hesitation. I thought about Marcus and Dante and Lyra, who'd fought like they were protecting family. I thought about father who'd destroyed himself through weakness, and mother who'd survived through strength. "I grew up watching my father destroy himself," I said, "watching my mother refuse to break despite everything. You think I'm fragile because I'm low-born? I survived poverty. I can survive politics." "This is more than politics." "I know." I met his storm-gray eyes. "But someone needs to help you find these bastards, and I'm very good at noticing when things are wrong." Something changed in his expression. The ice cracked, just for a moment. "Then we start hunting tomorrow." He left with Marcus and Dante, planning strategy, coordinating response. Lyra stayed behind. She was shaking. The attack had been close. Too close. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for noticing, for acting. Thank me when we catch whoever's behind it." She smiled, sad and tired. "My brother is right, you know. You're passing all the tests." "What if I don't want to be tested? Then you're in the wrong kingdom." She squeezed my shoulder once. "But I'm glad you're here anyway." After she left, I stood in the empty hall and looked at my hands. They'd finally stopped shaking. Blood had spattered across the borrowed dress. Someone else's blood. I should have felt horrified, traumatized. Instead, I just felt tired and strangely calm. Mother had been right about one thing. Kindness was strength. But she'd never said kindness meant being soft. Sometimes kindness meant throwing wine carafes at people trying to murder dinner guests. Sometimes it meant learning to fight, learning to notice, learning to survive. The mate bond hummed under my skin. Real or manufactured, I still couldn't tell. But what I could tell was this. Kyle Northraven needed someone who could stand beside him in the darkness. Someone who wouldn't break when the pressure came. Someone who could see patterns and ask hard questions and throw wine carafes when necessary. Maybe I wasn't that person yet, but I could learn, had been learning, would keep learning. I touched the wolf pendant through the fabric, warm against my skin. My grandmother had worn it, her mother before her. Women who'd survived impossible things. I came from a long line of survivors. 30 days, Cale had said, to verify the bond, to verify me. Fine, I'd give him 30 days, and by the end of it, he'd know exactly what I was made of. Not destiny, not magic, not some chosen one prophecy, just competence. Earned through sweat and observation, and refusing to quit even when quitting seemed smarter. I walked back to my room through halls that no longer felt like a prison. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin. Tomorrow, I'd start learning how to be more than just a textile worker who noticed details. Tomorrow, I'd start becoming whatever this kingdom needed me to be. Not because of the mate bond, not because some god decided I was special, but because I'd made a choice, and I didn't break promises. Not to my mother, not to myself, and not to the king who'd offered me 30 days and gotten someone willing to fight for every single one of them. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't invisible anymore. Wasn't the girl people crossed the street to avoid? Wasn't the unmated failure hiding in the back of ceremonial halls. I was seen, I was tested, I was standing, and I had no intention of falling. The first body arrived 3 days after the assassination attempt. A young warrior named Finn, 20 years old, promising career. Marcus had been training him personally. They found what was left of him in the northern woods. Silver poisoning, slow death, the kind that took hours, the kind meant to send a message. I stood in the morgue beside Kyle and Marcus and Dante, looking at what remained. Finn's face was locked in a scream that death hadn't released. His hands clawed, his body twisted. Silver did that to wolves, turned their own strength against them, made every heartbeat pump poison through their veins until finally the heart just stopped. He was on patrol, Marcus said. His voice was flat, empty, the way voices get when emotion would break you. Standard route, should have been safe. Nothing is safe anymore, Kyle replied. He looked at the body with eyes that had seen too much death. Not since my father, not since they started this. Who are they? I asked, speaking for the first time since entering the morgue. That's what we need to find out. Dante was examining Finn's wounds with clinical precision. Silver weapons require resources, money, connections. This isn't some random faction, this is organized. I studied Finn's hands. The silver burns there were defensive. He'd tried to fight back, tried to disarm his attacker. Failed. Can we trace the silver? I asked. Where it came from? Silver is silver, Marcus said bitterly. Could come from anywhere. But weapons require smithing, I pressed. Specific techniques, especially for anti-wolf weapons. Someone had to forge these. Someone with knowledge of how silver affects your kind. Dante looked up. You're suggesting we find the smith. I'm suggesting we follow the money. I moved closer to the table, forced myself to look at Finn's ruined face. To remember this was a person. Someone Marcus had trained. Someone with family and friends and a future that ended screaming in the woods. Smithing costs money. Hiring assassins costs money. Someone is funding this. Find the money trail. Find who's behind it. Cale studied me. You sound like you've done this before. My father was a merchant before he was a gambler. I learned bookkeeping young, how to track expenses, income, where money flows. I met his eyes. Let me see your treasury records, the detailed ones, not the summaries you show counsel. Those are confidential. So was my interrogation. But we're past secrets now, aren't we? I gestured to Finn's corpse. Someone in your court is funding this. Someone with access to royal resources. Let me look at the numbers. I'll find the leak. Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. She wants to do accounting, while my warrior is dead on a table. Your warrior is dead because someone paid for his death, I said quietly. Let me find who paid. Then you can make them understand what that cost. The treasury was kept in the deepest part of the residence, stone walls 3 feet thick, guards at every entrance. The records themselves filled an entire room, ledgers stacked floor to ceiling, years of transactions, imports, exports, salaries, expenses, contracts. I started with the most recent year, working backwards, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything that didn't fit. Dante worked beside me. He had his own methods. cross-referencing guard rotations with attack timings, checking which nobles had been present for what discussions, building a web of suspects. "Here," I said on the second day, pointing to a series of entries. "These payments, to offshore accounts. They're listed as trade investments, but the amounts don't match any active trading agreements." Dante leaned over. "How can you tell?" "Because I cross-referenced them with the actual trade manifests." I showed him my notes. Father had taught me to always verify, always check source documents. These payments start 8 months ago, right after the spring council session. Small at first, a few hundred gold, then escalating. The most recent transfer was 2,000 gold, made 3 weeks before the assassination attempt. Enough to hire professional killers and equip them with silver weapons. Dante's face was grim. "Can you trace where the payments originated?" "They're routed through multiple accounts, but they all originate from one office." I pointed to the authorization codes. "Here, the Master of Coin." "Lord Hadrian Voss." Dante sat back. "Lady Morgana's nephew, third in line for council leadership. Would he benefit from destabilizing the throne? He's a traditionalist, thinks Kael is too young, too impulsive, too focused on the mate bond instead of political alliances." Dante's jaw tightened. "But he's also family to Morgana. She'd never allow this." "Unless she doesn't know." I studied the numbers again. "Or unless she's part of it." We brought the evidence to Kael that evening. He listened in silence as I walked through the financial trail, the offshore accounts, the timing, the authorization codes. When I finished, he looked at the documents like they were poison. "Hadrian," he said finally. "My father trusted him, Morgana vouched for him, and he's been funding assassinations." "We don't have proof of what the money was used for," Dante cautioned. "Just proof that it was transferred. Hadrian could claim it was for legitimate purposes. Then we make him prove it." Kael's eyes were cold, hard. "We need him to reveal himself, to make a move we can track." "A trap," Marcus said. He'd been standing by the window, silent until now. "Use the money trail to bait him." "Bait how?" I asked. Kael looked at me. We make you vulnerable. Let it spread that you've discovered evidence, that you're the threat. See who comes for you." My stomach twisted. "You want to use me as bait?" "Yes." At least he was honest. "And if the trap fails, if they actually kill me?" "We won't let that happen." Marcus moved closer. "My team will be watching, hidden, ready. But it has to look real, has to look like you're exposed." "How exposed?" "You leave the residence," Dante said. "Visit your mother at the medical wing. Light security, obvious route. We spread word that you've been investigating finances, that you found something. Make you look like a threat that needs eliminating." I thought about Finn's twisted body, the hours of silver poisoning, the message written in his death. "When?" "Tomorrow," Kael said, "before they have time to prepare better defenses." "Tomorrow." I nodded slowly. "Okay." "Arya," his voice softened fractionally, "you don't have to do this. We can find another way." "Can you?" I met his eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, this is the fastest way to get answers, and every day we wait more people like Finn die. So no, we do this tomorrow, we end this." The plan was simple, too simple, which meant it would probably work or get me killed, probably both. I left the residence at midday, dressed in civilian clothes, just 2 guards accompanying me. Marcus's team was hidden in the crowd, on rooftops, in alleys, watching, waiting. But they had to stay far enough back to make the bait convincing. The medical wing was across the market district. 20-minute walk through streets packed with vendors and shoppers and the normal chaos of daily life. Plenty of places to hide, plenty of opportunities for an attack. My mother was sitting up when I arrived, color in her cheeks, reading a book someone had brought her. She smiled when she saw me, then frowned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I sat beside the bed. "Just wanted to visit." "You're a terrible liar." She set down the book. "What happened?" "We're hunting the people who killed the king's father." I kept my voice low. "I found evidence. Now we're waiting to see who comes for me." Her hand found mine. "Your bait." "Yes." "Arya." "I know." I squeezed her fingers. "But Mother, I'm good at this. The investigation, the patterns. I can help end this. Actually help. Not just survive, but make things better." "And if you die doing it?" "Then I die doing something that matters." I smiled, tried to make it reassuring, failed. "Better than dying at a loom." She didn't argue, just held my hand and we sat together while outside Marcus's team waited for killers to make their move. The attack came on the return trip, in the narrow street between the market and the residence. Perfect ambush point, high walls on both sides, limited exits, exactly where tactical training said to strike. 4 of them, professional, coordinated, not assassins, mercenaries, the kind with military training and flexible morals. They hit my guards first, fast, brutal. One guard went down with a blade in his kidney. The other managed to draw his sword before silver wire wrapped around his throat. I ran, not because the plan said to run, but because instinct overrode training. Survival instinct, the kind that doesn't care about tactics, just cares about staying alive. They followed, herding me toward a side alley, away from the main street, away from witnesses. Exactly what we'd expected, exactly what Marcus's team was waiting for. Dante dropped from a rooftop, landed behind the rear mercenary, silent, efficient. His knife found the gap between spine and skull. The mercenary dropped, never even saw it coming. Marcus came from the opposite side, already shifted. His wolf form was a shadow with teeth. He hit the second mercenary low, took out his knees. The man's scream cut off when 200 pounds of fury closed jaws around his throat. I turned to face the remaining 2. They'd seen their team fall, knew the trap had sprung, should have run. Instead, they came forward. Because they were professionals and professionals finish the job. The first one reached me, grabbed my arm. I used the momentum, spun inside his guard like Dante had taught me. My knee found his groin. His grip loosened. My elbow found his throat. He staggered back, gasping. The second one was smarter, kept his distance, drew a silver blade, short sword length, made for close quarters. He feinted left, came right, fast, too fast. The blade caught my side, not deep, just enough to hurt, to bleed. I stumbled. He pressed the advantage, blade coming up for the killing strike. Then Marcus's jaws closed around his sword arm, bone cracked. The mercenary screamed. The sword clattered to cobblestones. Dante secured them both, zip ties, military grade, the kind that don't break. 2 alive, he reported. 2 dead. How bad is the cut? I looked down. Blood soaked my shirt. Not spurting, not arterial, just bleeding steady. I'll live. Good. Kyle emerged from the shadows. I hadn't even seen where he'd been hiding. Because we need you to make them talk. The interrogation room was underground. Stone walls, iron shackles, the kind of place where screams don't escape. The 2 captured mercenaries were chained to opposite walls, separated, isolated, classic interrogation setup. I sat across from the first one, the one I'd need. He was maybe 30, scarred, hard-eyed, the kind of hard that came from doing terrible things and sleeping fine afterward. Who hired you? I asked. He laughed. Go to hell. Wrong answer. I nodded to Dante. He produced a small vial, clear liquid. Silver solution, diluted enough that it won't kill you, just hurt, a lot. You won't torture me. But his eyes said he wasn't sure. You're right, I won't. Because torture is unreliable. People say anything to make it stop. I leaned forward. But Dante here is very good at making people want to talk. And I'm very good at knowing when they're lying. So we're going to have a conversation. You're going to tell me who paid you. And if you lie, I'll know. And then things get unpleasant. He spat at my feet. I don't know who hired us. We get contracts through intermediaries, dead drops, encrypted messages. That's how professionals work. But you know who authorized the payment. I kept my voice level, calm, because you got paid, and payment requires authorization, signatures, transfer codes. You're too smart to accept a contract without verifying the money is real. Something shifted in his eyes. Calculation. He was weighing options, prison versus betrayal versus death. The code was royal, he said finally. Master of coin authorization. We verified it through banking channels. Hadrian Voss. I don't know names, just codes, but yeah, royal treasury, offshore routing, clean money made dirty. He met my eyes. That's all I know, I swear it. I believed him. Thank you. What happens to me now? Prison, long sentence, but alive. I stood. Take him to the cells, give him decent food. He cooperated. In the hallway, Kale was waiting. Hadrian. Yes. We arrest him tonight, before he knows the trap failed. But Dante was frowning. Something's wrong. Hadrian is careful, paranoid. He wouldn't use royal authorization codes for something like this. Too traceable. Unless he wanted it traced, I said slowly, understanding dawning. Unless he's not the mastermind, just the fall guy. Someone set him up, Cale said. Someone with access to his codes, his accounts. Family, Marcus said quietly. Someone close enough to have access, close enough to betray him. We all looked at each other, the same name hanging unspoken between us. Lady Morgana Ashford. We found Hadrian in his office, surrounded by documents, burning them. The fireplace roared with paper and parchment, and years of careful record-keeping going up in smoke. He looked up when we entered, no surprise in his eyes, just resignation. I wondered when you'd figure it out, he said calmly. Figure what out? Cale asked. His hand was on his sword hilt. That you've been funding assassinations? That you killed my father? I killed no one. Hadrian continued feeding papers to the flames. But I knew who did. Knew and said nothing, which I suppose makes me complicit. Who? The word came out like a blade. Hadrian looked at us. Really looked. My aunt, Lady Morgana. She's been planning this for years, since your father's coronation. Maybe before. Liar. But Cale's voice lacked conviction. Am I? Hadrian pulled a folder from his desk, threw it on the table between us. Her correspondence with Eastern Valley, with Lord Vallon, plans for joint invasion, division of territories, installation of puppet rulers. It's all here, dated, signed, authenticated. Dante grabbed the folder, started reading. His expression darkened with every page. Why are you showing us this? I asked. If she's family, if you've been protecting her? Because I'm tired. Hadrian sat heavily. Tired of the lies, the killing. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. Thought Morgana knew better. Thought she had the experience, the wisdom. But all she has is ambition. He looked at Kael. Your father trusted her, right up until she poisoned him. Used my codes, my accounts, set me up to take the fall if anyone ever investigated. Where is she now? Marcus demanded. Where do you think? Making her final moves. She knows we're close, knows the trap failed. Hadrian gestured to the burning documents. That's why I'm destroying evidence. Not to protect her, to protect myself. Give me immunity, witness protection, and I'll tell you everything. Cale studied him. You're a traitor and a coward. Yes, but I'm a living traitor and coward who can help you stop her. Hadrian smiled bitterly. Your choice, Your Majesty, justice or victory. You can't have both. The decision took maybe 5 seconds. Dante, take him into protective custody. Get everything he knows, locations, contacts, plans. Cale turned to Marcus. Find Morgana, now. We found her in the council chamber, not hiding, not running, just sitting at the head of the table like she belonged there, like she'd been waiting for us. Documents spread before her, maps, troop movements, intelligence reports, everything laid out neat and organized. Took you longer than I expected, she said calmly. I thought Arya would piece it together yesterday. You killed the king, Cale said. His voice was ice. My father. I did. No denial, no excuse, just acknowledgement. He was weak, sentimental, unwilling to make the hard choices that leadership requires, so I made them for him. By murdering him. By saving the kingdom. Morgana stood. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, tired. Your father wanted peace with Eastern Valley, wanted cooperation, wanted to believe Lord Vallon was an ally. But I knew better. I've served 3 kings, watched Eastern Valley slowly consume us. Trade routes, resource rights, political marriages. They were winning without ever drawing a sword, so I took action. You allied with them yourself, Dante said. He'd been reading her documents. These plans, joint invasion, territory division. You're giving Vallon exactly what you claim to oppose. I'm giving him what he wants, so I can take what I need. Morgana's smile was sharp. Vallon thinks I'm his ally, his partner. But once we've removed Kael and installed a more cooperative ruler, I'll have access to his military, his resources, his networks, and then I'll turn them against him. You're insane, Marcus breathed. I'm practical. She looked at each of us. Kael is too young, too idealistic, too distracted by a low-born mate to see the real threats. The kingdom needs experienced leadership, ruthless leadership, someone willing to do what's necessary. Someone like you, I said quietly. Yes. Her eyes found mine. I actually liked you, you know. You were smarter than expected, observant, competent, but you made Kael weak, made him believe in love instead of duty. That's why you had to be removed. The assassination attempt at the dinner, Kael said. You ordered it. I ordered several. You're surprisingly difficult to kill. Morgana gathered her documents. Neat. Orderly. But it doesn't matter now. Valen's forces cross the border tomorrow. 3,000 warriors. You have maybe 2,000 defenders. The math is simple. We'll fight. Kael's hand was still on his sword. And you'll lose. Then Valen will install his daughter as queen. I'll serve as her chief advisor. And the kingdom will finally have the strong leadership it needs. She moved toward the door, calm, unhurried. You can arrest me if you like. Put me in chains, but it won't stop what's coming. The wheels are already in motion. Marcus blocked the door. You're not leaving. Then kill me. Morgana met his eyes. Go ahead. Prove you're just as ruthless as I am. Don't. Kael's voice cut through the tension. She's right. Killing her changes nothing. Valen still invades. We still face 3,000 warriors. We still need to prepare. So you're letting her go? Marcus looked incredulous. I'm prioritizing survival over revenge. Kael gestured to Dante. Take her to the deepest cell we have. Full security. No visitors. She wants to watch the kingdom fall. She can do it from chains. As Dante led her away, Morgana looked back at me. You were right about one thing. Kindness is strength, but it's also weakness. Remember that when you're making the hard choices. When you're deciding who lives and who dies. Kindness won't save you then. After she was gone, Kael slammed his fist on the table. The maps jumped. 3,000 warriors. How long do we have? Hadrian said tomorrow, I replied. But he could be lying. We should assume less time. We can't win a straight fight, Marcus said. Not against those numbers. Then we don't fight straight. I studied the maps. The border, the mountain passes, the terrain. We use what we have. Geography, knowledge, surprise. You sound like you have a plan, Dante said. The beginning of one. I pointed to the largest pass. This is where they'll come through. It's the widest, the fastest route, but it's also the most defensible. We don't have enough warriors to hold it, Kael said. We don't need to hold it. We need to delay it. Buy time for reinforcements. I looked at him. You said Southern Coast was neutral. What if we gave them a reason not to be? Like what? Like evidence of Valen's invasion plans. Proof that he's not content with Northern Peaks. That he's building an empire. Southern Coast has to decide. Support us now or face Valen alone later. Marcus nodded slowly. She's right. Southern Coast won't want Eastern Valley controlling mountain passes. It threatens their trade routes. So we send a diplomatic mission, Dante said, with evidence, fast. And while they're considering it, we fortify the passes. Make Valen pay for every mile. Kael looked at me. You're good at this, strategic thinking. I'm good at seeing patterns. This is just patterns on a larger scale. I traced the map. But there's a problem. The diplomatic mission. It's dangerous. Whoever goes will be traveling through territory Valen could already control. I'll go, Marcus said immediately. No, Kael shook his head. I need you here, leading defenses, preparing warriors. Then who? Marcus asked. They all looked at me. Absolutely not, Kael said before I could speak. You're not trained for this, not equipped. I'm exactly equipped for this. I met his eyes. I found the financial trail. I interrogated the mercenary. I'm the one who figured out Morgana's game. I can convince Southern Coast because I understand the evidence. I can explain it, make them see the threat. You could also die. We could all die. But if I stay here, I'm just another person to protect. If I go, I actually help. I straightened. This is what you hired me for, isn't it? To notice things, to think strategically, to be useful. I didn't hire you to get yourself killed. Then send protection. Dante, Lyra, Elder Thomas. A small, fast team that can move quickly and negotiate effectively. I pushed the map toward him. You know I'm right. He did. I could see it in his eyes. The calculation, the weighing of risks and benefits. The king making decisions the man didn't want to make. Fine. The word came out hard. But Dante leads security. Lyra handles noble protocols. Elder Thomas advises. And you stay alive. That's an order. Yes, Your Majesty. I tried to smile. I'm very good at following orders. You're terrible at it. But his hand found mine under the table, squeezed once. Brief. Come back to me. I will. It was a promise neither of us was sure I could keep. We left before dawn. 4 of us. Dante, Lyra, Elder Thomas and me. Light pack, fast horses, the evidence secured in waterproof cases. Our route took us through the mountains, narrow passes and steep climbs, safer than the main roads but slower. We couldn't afford slow, but we couldn't afford ambush more. Elder Thomas rode beside me. He was old, maybe 70, but he sat his horse like a man half that age, straight-backed, alert. He'd served 2 kings and was now serving a third. His loyalty was the unquestioning kind, the kind you earned through decades of service. "You did well with Morgana," he said as we navigated a particularly steep section, seeing through her deception. "I just followed the money. She made it too complicated, tried too hard to hide it. That's what makes you valuable. You see complexity and find simplicity." He smiled. Kyle chose well, even if the circumstances were unusual. He didn't choose, the mate bond did. Did it? Thomas looked at me. Or did it simply give you both permission to choose each other? I didn't have an answer for that. We made good time the first day, camped in a defensible position, set watches. Dante checked perimeters constantly. His paranoia was comforting, the kind that kept people alive. The second day, we crossed into neutral territory, the stretch between northern peaks and southern coast. Technically unclaimed, practically a no-man's land where laws were flexible and survival was negotiable. The ambush came in the afternoon, in a narrow pass where the walls rose steep on both sides. Perfect kill zone, exactly where tactical training said never to be. They'd learned from the last attempt. This wasn't 4 mercenaries. This was 30. Valen's warriors, professional soldiers with military discipline and silver weapons, and orders to make sure none of us reached southern coast. "Ride!" Dante screamed. But there was nowhere to ride. They'd blocked both ends of the pass, boxed us in. Classic hammer and anvil. We dismounted, formed defensive positions. Dante and Lyra shifted. Their wolf forms were massive, terrifying. But 30 against 2 was mathematics that didn't care about terror. Elder Thomas stayed human. He was too old for combat shifting. The transformation took too much energy, so he drew his sword instead. Old steel, well-maintained. The blade of a man who'd fought in younger days and remembered how. I had a crossbow. Short range, limited ammunition. Dante had taught me basics. Point, breath, squeeze, don't jerk. I put a bolt through the first warrior's throat, reloaded. Put another through the second one's eye, reloaded. They came anyway. Wave after wave, silver blades catching sunlight. Dante tore through them. His jaws found throats and limbs and anything he could reach. Lyra fought beside him, coordinated, practiced. They'd trained together for years and it showed. But there were too many. A warrior got past their line, came at me. I shot him. Center mass. He kept coming. Silver blade raised. I rolled. His sword sparked off stone where my head had been. Came up. Shot him again. Throat this time. He went down gurgling. Another took his place. Then another. I was out of bolts. Switched to the knife Dante had given me. Short blade. Last resort weapon. The warrior laughed. Came forward. Confident. I waited. Let him close. Feinted high. Went low. The knife found his femoral artery. Blood sprayed. He dropped. I turned, looking for the next threat. Found Elder Thomas instead. He had 3 warriors surrounding him, his sword moving in patterns I recognized from old combat manuals. Classic forms, perfect technique. But he was 70, and they were 20, and numbers eventually win. One of them got through. Silver blade, between his ribs. Thomas gasped, staggered, his sword fell. The warrior pulled his blade free, raised it for the killing strike. Lyra hit him. 150 pounds of wolf form, jaws closing around his skull. The crunch was audible even over the battle noise. I ran to Thomas. He was on his knees, blood soaking his robes. The wound was bad, deep, possibly fatal. "Pressure," he gasped. "Apply pressure." I did. My hands came away red. Too much blood. Too fast. "The pass," he said, grabbing my arm. "Collapse it. Only way." "What?" "The pass. Use explosives. Controlled collapse." His grip was iron despite the blood loss. "Bottles in my pack. Volatile herbs. Wolf strength. Can bring down the walls." I looked up. The stone walls rose 50 feet on either side. If they collapsed, the enemy would be trapped, buried, killed. So would we. "Do it," Thomas ordered. His voice was weakening. "Stop them. That matters more." "Elder Thomas?" "I'm dead anyway, child. Make it count." He smiled, blood on his teeth. "Tell Kale I served 3 kings, but he was the best. Tell him." "I will." My voice broke. "I promise." He nodded, closed his eyes, stopped moving. I stood. Dante and Lyra were still fighting, holding the enemy back, but barely. 20 warriors remained, maybe more. We'd killed 10. It wasn't enough. And I ran to Thomas's pack, found the bottles, clay vessels sealed with wax, labeled in his careful script. Explosive compound, handle with extreme care. I'd never used explosives before, but I'd watched Dante train others, knew the theory. Placement mattered, structure points, load-bearing sections, the places where one stone supported many. I found the first point, placed a bottle, found the second, third, fourth, used all 6, then ran back to Dante. "We need to collapse the pass," I shouted over the combat noise. He looked at me, at Thomas's body. Understanding dawned. "We'll be trapped. We'll be alive, they'll be buried, we can dig out later." "Arya, do it now while we still can." Lyra shifted back to human, naked and blood-covered. "I'll set them off. Wolf strength, can reach the triggers fast." "Together," Dante said. He was bleeding from multiple wounds. "We do this together." We retreated, back against the wall, as far from the blast points as we could get. The enemy saw their chance, charged, all of them, final push. Lyra and Dante shifted simultaneously, ran for the bottles, used their massive wolf forms to crush the clay. The compound ignited, 6 points of violent chemistry. Stone cracked. The sound was deafening, like the world ending. The walls came down. Thousands of tons of rock and earth and ancient mountain. Falling, crushing, burying everything in its path. The enemy disappeared under the avalanche, screaming, dying, gone. We were slammed against the far wall. I felt ribs crack. Breath left my lungs. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't see. Dust and darkness and the taste of blood. Then nothing. I woke to pain. Everything hurt. Breathing hurt. Moving hurt. Existing hurt. But I was alive. We were in a pocket. Small space where the collapse had created a natural shelter, maybe 10 feet across. The bodies of 3 enemy warriors lay nearby, killed by falling rock. Thomas was there too, still, peaceful, like he was sleeping. Dante was conscious, barely. His leg was trapped under stone, crushed, probably broken. Lyra was beside him, human form again, holding his hand. Blood matted her blonde hair. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad," Lyra said. "We're trapped. Maybe 50 feet of rock above us. Could be more. Can we dig out?" "Eventually. If we had time. Tools. Strength." She touched her side, winced. "I think my ribs are broken. Dante's leg is shattered. You look like you went through a meat grinder." "I feel worse than I look." I tried to sit up, failed. "How long before reinforcements arrive?" "KL will send people when we don't report in." 2 days? 3? Dante's voice was strained. "We don't have 3 days. We have whatever we make." I forced myself upright this time, ignored the screaming from my ribs. "Search for any gaps, any airflow. If air is getting in, there's a way out." We searched, slowly, carefully, found a narrow gap in the rubble, maybe 6 inches wide. Air flowed through it, fresh, cold, from outside. "Too small," Lyra said. "For now." I studied the gap, the stones around it. "But if we can move these, widen it, maybe." We worked. Hours, days. I lost track, using broken weapons as levers, our hands as tools, moving stones one at a time, inch by inch. The gap widened, 10 inches, 12, 18. Dante couldn't help. His leg was too damaged. He stayed with Thomas's body, talking to it, thanking him for years of service, for wisdom, for friendship. I heard him cry when he thought we weren't listening. Lyra worked beside me, silent, determined. Her hands bled, her ribs screamed. She didn't stop. "Why did you come?" I asked during one rest. "You're a princess. You could have stayed safe." "So could you." She smiled, tired. "We came for the same reason. Because staying safe while others fight isn't strength. It's cowardice dressed up as wisdom." "Your brother would disagree." "My brother is terrified of losing people he cares about. That's why he pushes so hard, why he takes so much on himself." She looked at me. "You're good for him. You make him remember he's not alone." "I make him worry." "Same thing." She went back to moving stones. 3 days after the collapse, we broke through. The gap was just wide enough for a human to squeeze through. Not a wolf. Lyra went first, then helped pull me after. We left Dante with Thomas, promised to return with help. Outside the pass was devastation. 30 buried warriors, tons of collapsed stone, and us. 2 women covered in blood and dust and victory that tasted like ash. "We did it," Lyra said. "We survived." I looked back at the rubble, at Dante trapped below, at Thomas's body somewhere in the dark. That's not the same as winning. But we had the evidence, secured in waterproof cases that had survived the collapse. We had our lives, and we had Southern Coast 3 days ahead. We walked, slow, painful, every step agony. But we walked, because stopping meant giving up, and we'd lost too much to give up now. Southern Coast sent riders when they saw us, took us in, gave us medical care, listened to our story, read the evidence, saw the truth in Morgana's documents and Valen's invasion plans. They agreed to alliance, sent 500 warriors north immediately, promised more if needed. It took another week to dig Dante out. Kael himself led the rescue team. Found him alive, barely. His leg would never be the same, but he was alive. We buried Elder Thomas in the mountains, where he'd died buying time for a kingdom. Marcus spoke the words. I stood beside Kael and tried not to think about how the old man's last words had been orders, how he'd died as he'd lived, in service. Kael held my hand during the ceremony. After everyone left, he finally spoke. "You were right. The mission, the strategy, all of it. You saved us." "Thomas saved us. Dante, Lyra, I just followed through. You made the hard call, to collapse the pass, to sacrifice the trade route for time." He looked at me. That's leadership, real leadership. Not the kind they teach in council chambers, the kind that costs something. It cost Thomas his life. Yes, and he chose to give it. That's what service means. Kael's jaw tightened. Morgana was wrong. Kindness isn't weakness, but it's also not enough. Sometimes you have to choose between saving one person and saving thousands, and the right choice still feels wrong. Does it get easier? No. He pulled me closer. But you learn to live with it. Learn to honor the sacrifice by making it mean something. We stood together in the mountain silence, 2 people learning what command cost, what leadership meant, what duty required. The war was coming. Valen's forces were already moving. But we had allies now. We had time. We had each other. And we had the memory of an old man who'd served 3 kings and died making sure the 4th survived. That had to be enough, because it was all we had. Below us, Marcus stood with Sarah, his new mate, the warrior who'd helped evacuate during the assassination attempt. They'd bonded fast. Crisis did that. Made you realize life was too short for hesitation. Lyra was recovering. Her ribs would heal. Her nightmares would fade. Eventually. Dante walked with a cane now. Always would. But he walked. That was what mattered. And me? I'd left the residence a textile worker playing at strategy. I'd come back understanding what it meant to command, to sacrifice, to make the calls that kept you awake at night. Kael had asked me to stay 30 days, to let him verify the bond was real. We were past verification now, past testing, past the careful dance of maybe and perhaps. War was coming. And when it arrived, I'd be standing beside him, not as decoration, not as political necessity, but as partner, as strategist, as someone who'd earned her place through competence and sacrifice and the willingness to make hard choices. The mate bond hummed between us, real, undeniable. But what we'd built was stronger than biology. It was choice, repeated, daily, in blood and stone and the determination to survive together. Tomorrow, Valen's army would reach the border. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. But tonight, we stood on a mountain and honored the dead and prepared for what came next. Together, always together, because that was the only way to survive what the world threw at us. Elder Thomas had known what service cost, had died proving that some battles were worth the price. We'd make sure his sacrifice mattered, make sure the kingdom he'd served survived, not through destiny, but through competence and determination and the refusal to break even when breaking seemed easier. That was our promise, to him, to each other, to the future we'd fight to build. Valen's army reached the northern border on a Tuesday morning. 3,000 warriors, professional soldiers with Eastern Valley discipline and silver weapons that gleamed like promises of death. They camped in the valley below the main pass, siege tents in perfect rows, supply lines organized with military precision. Everything about their deployment said they expected this to take time, expected us to break slowly. Kael stood on the wall beside me, Marcus on his other side, Dante behind us with his cane. The injury from the pass collapse had healed poorly. He'd never run again, never shift smoothly. But he could still command, still think tactically, still make the calls that kept warriors alive. 3,000, Marcus said quietly. We have 2,000 defenders, 500 Southern Coast allies, still outnumbered. Numbers aren't everything, Cale replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Numbers were something, often the most important something. They'll test our defenses first, Dante said, probing attacks, looking for weaknesses, then commit when they find them. So we don't give them weaknesses. I studied the valley, the approaches, the terrain. We make every yard cost them, bleed them, make victory expensive enough that Valen questions whether it's worth the price. Attrition warfare. Marcus nodded slowly. We can't win decisively, but we can make them lose interest. Or we hold until Valen's nobles decide this war isn't in their interest. I'd been reading the intelligence reports Hadrian had provided. Eastern Valley wasn't unified. Valen had pushed this invasion against significant internal opposition. If it dragged on, if casualties mounted, his support would crack. That could take months, Cale said. Then we prepare for months. I met his eyes. You said you needed someone who could stand beside you in the darkness. This is the darkness, let me stand. He looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to send me somewhere safe, somewhere far from battle and blood and the reality of 3,000 enemies who wanted him dead. Instead, he nodded. Together. Always. The first attack came that afternoon. Not a probing assault, a full commitment. 500 warriors hitting the main gate with siege equipment and silver weapons, and the kind of coordination that spoke of experienced commanders. Our defenders held, barely. The walls were strong, ancient stone that had weathered centuries. But siege rams didn't care about history. They cared about physics. Force applied repeatedly to the same point. Eventually something broke. I watched from the command center. A stone building behind the main wall where Cale coordinated defense. Maps covered every surface. Messengers ran constantly. Reports flooded in. Enemy positions, casualty counts, supply status. The information came faster than any one person could process. That's where I helped. Processing, organizing, turning chaos into clarity. I'd set up a system, color-coded markers for different threats, numerical tracking for resources, a master ledger that showed exactly what we had and what we were losing and how long we could sustain current engagement levels. Gate holding, a messenger reported, but we've lost 12 defenders, silver weapons inflicting heavy casualties. I marked it on the board, 12 dead, updated the casualty count, recalculated our combat effective strength. We're losing defenders faster than we can replace them, I said quietly to Cale. I know. His jaw was tight. But if we pull back from the gate, they'll breach. They'll breach anyway if we keep trading at this rate. I showed him the numbers. At current casualty ratios, we can hold maybe 3 more days. Then we won't have enough defenders to man the walls. Then what do you suggest? Rotating defense. Fresh troops every 2 hours. Keeps everyone sharp. Reduces fatigue casualties. I pointed to another section of map. And we need to start hitting their supply lines. They're feeding 3,000 warriors. That requires logistics. Disrupt their food, their water. Make them hungry. Guerrilla tactics. Marcus had joined us, blood on his armor, exhaustion in his eyes. Send small teams behind their lines. Sabotage. Exactly. I looked at him. Can you spare the warriors? I can spare 20. Good ones. Experienced. He studied the map. Hit here and here. Their supply depot and water source. Make them choose between defending their camp and attacking our walls. Cale authorized it. The teams went out that night. Silent. Deadly. They burned 2 supply depots and poisoned 3 water barrels before Valen's security caught on. Lost 4 warriors in the retreat. But the damage was done. The next morning, Valen's forces didn't attack. They were dealing with hungry soldiers and contaminated water, reorganizing, adapting. We used the time to rotate defenders, treat wounded, redistribute silver-resistant armor. The breathing room was temporary but necessary. You did well, Cale said that evening. We stood on the wall watching Valen's camp, fires burning, patrols doubled. They'd learned. The tactics, the logistics, you're thinking like a commander. I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want to die. I leaned against the stone. Every muscle ached. I'd been awake 30 hours, running on coffee and determination, and the knowledge that stopping meant people died. How long can we hold? Honestly? He sighed. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then we're out of supplies or defenders or both. And Southern Coast reinforcements? Another week, assuming they come at all. Alliances are fragile things. I thought about Elder Thomas, dying in the past to secure that alliance. They'll come. We paid for it. Let's hope the price was enough. The attack resumed the next day, harder, more coordinated. Valen had adapted to our guerrilla tactics, sent hunters after our sabotage teams, fortified his supply lines, protected his water sources. We adapted in return, shifted defensive positions, created false weaknesses that turned into kill zones, used every trick Dante knew and some he invented on the spot. But we were still losing, slowly, inevitably. The mathematics didn't lie. 3,000 against 2,500. Attrition favored the larger force. On day 7, Kale made a decision that probably saved us. I'm leading the field army out. We can't just defend. We need to hit them where they're weak. That's what they expect, I argued. Valen wants you in open combat, where his numbers matter most. He also wants us trapped behind these walls, slowly starving, slowly dying. Kyle pulled on his armor, black steel inscribed with his family crest. I take 1,000 warriors, hit their eastern flank, draw forces away from the siege, buy you time. Me? The word came out sharp. You manage the home front, the defenses, the civilian population, everything I'd be doing if I was here. He met my eyes. I'm not asking, I'm ordering. Can you do it? Could I? Run a besieged city while the king led forces into battle? Manage resources and morale and the 1,000 decisions that kept people alive? I thought about the textile factory, 14-hour days, numbed fingers, the supervisor with his ledger and dead eyes. I'd survived that. Survived poverty and my father's gambling and my mother's illness and assassination attempts and mountain ambushes. Yes, I said, I can do it. Then I'm counting on you. He kissed me. Brief, hard, like he was afraid it might be the last time. Don't let them break through. Don't let the civilians panic, and don't die. Those are your orders. Same to you. He smiled, grim, determined. See you when this is over. Then he was gone, taking Marcus and 1,000 of our best warriors, leaving me with Dante and the walls and 15,000 civilians who needed someone to tell them everything would be okay. I didn't tell them that, didn't lie. Instead, I told them the truth. We were besieged, outnumbered, running low on supplies. But we were Northern Peaks, we were survivors, and we'd hold because the alternative was unthinkable. They believed me. Or maybe they just believed in the need to believe. Either way, they followed orders. Rationed food, manned defenses, did what was necessary. The civilian militia helped. 300 fighters, poorly trained but motivated. They couldn't hold the main walls, but they could man secondary positions, watch for infiltrators, keep order in the streets. On day 10, the crisis hit. Not military, medical. The wounded were overwhelming our physicians. Too many casualties. Not enough supplies, not enough hands. People were dying of infections that proper medicine could cure, dying because we couldn't treat everyone fast enough. I went to the hospital, a converted warehouse now filled with cots and blood and the sounds of people suffering. The head physician was maybe 50, exhausted, operating on his 3rd straight day without sleep. We need more physicians, he said bluntly. More supplies, more everything. I'm doing battlefield triage, deciding who lives and who dies based on resource availability. That's not medicine. That's murder with extra steps. What do you need specifically? He showed me. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, sutures, basic supplies that should have been plentiful, would have been plentiful if we weren't besieged. The civilian population has supplies, I said slowly. Personal stocks, family reserves. We need to requisition them. They won't give them up willingly. Then we compensate them. Fair market value, plus interest. We're not stealing, we're borrowing. I made notes. I'll draft the order. You focus on saving lives. The requisition order was unpopular. People don't like giving up resources during crisis. But I offered fair compensation, guaranteed repayment, made it clear this was temporary necessity, not permanent theft. Most complied. Those who didn't got visited by Dante's security teams. Gentle persuasion, firm insistence. We needed those supplies. People were dying. Personal comfort came second to collective survival. It worked. The hospital got what it needed. Casualty rates dropped. Not by much, but enough to matter. On day 12, Kale's gambit paid off. His field army hit Valen's eastern flank hard, burned their siege equipment, killed 300 warriors, drew significant forces away from our walls to counter the threat. The siege pressure eased, not much, but enough that we could breathe, could rotate defenders more frequently, could start thinking past immediate survival to actual strategy. That's when Lord Brennan made his move. I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the signs. Brennan was Lord Commander of the City Guard, 200 warriors under his direct command, Hadrian's ally before Hadrian's arrest, someone who'd been quiet, compliant, waiting for exactly this moment, when KL was away, when resources were stretched, when chaos provided cover. He struck during shift change, when the old guard was tired and the new guard was just arriving. 200 loyal warriors moved simultaneously, seized key positions: the armory, the treasury, the hospital, the water supply, and the command center where I was coordinating defense. I knew something was wrong when the door guards changed. New faces, hard expressions. They didn't announce themselves, just took positions, weapons ready. Brennan entered 5 minutes later, 50 years old, career soldier, the kind of professional who'd served faithfully for decades and decided loyalty had limits. "Miss Wren," he said pleasantly, "I need you to come with me." "On whose authority?" "Mine, as Lord Commander, exercising emergency powers to preserve stability." "Stability?" I stayed seated, hands visible, non-threatening. "Is that what you call a coup?" "I call it pragmatism." He moved closer. "KL is losing this war, bleeding our city dry for a mate bond that weakens us. You're a distraction, a liability, someone Valen can exploit. So you're working with Valen." "I'm working for Northern Peaks, which sometimes means making hard choices." He gestured, and 2 guards moved behind me. "You're under arrest. Charges are treason, conspiracy, unauthorized resource allocation. Sentence is execution. Dawn tomorrow." My heart hammered, but my voice stayed level. "On what evidence?" "Evidence?" He laughed. "You're low-born. You manipulated the king through false mate bond. You've wasted resources, destroyed trade routes, made decisions above your station. That's sufficient. The council will never approve this. The council is gone, fled or arrested. I control the city guard, the armory, the food supply." He smiled. "I control everything that matters, including you." They took me to the cells, deep underground, stone walls, iron bars, the kind of place screams didn't escape. Brennan wasn't subtle about his intentions. He wanted me dead, wanted the mate bond broken, wanted to sue for peace with Valen on terms that didn't include the low-born girl who'd complicated politics. I had maybe 12 hours before execution, 12 hours to escape, to warn someone, to stop this. The problem was simple. I was locked in a cell 3 levels underground, guarded by Brennan's loyal soldiers. No weapons, no allies, no obvious way out. So I went back to basics. What did I have? Knowledge, observation skills, the textile worker's eye for patterns and details. I studied the cell, old construction, maybe a century old. The stones were well fitted, but age created gaps, small ones, barely visible, but there. The mortar between stones degraded over time, became brittle, crumbled if you applied pressure correctly. I'd seen it in the old merchant quarter, buildings slowly falling apart from within. I started working, using the edge of my belt buckle as a makeshift tool, scraping mortar, quiet, patient, the way I'd worked the loom, repetitive motion, focused effort, hour after hour. The guards changed shift, new faces but same bored expressions. They didn't pay attention to prisoners. Why would they? The cell was secure, the bars unbreakable. They didn't notice the small pile of mortar dust I was hiding under the cot, didn't notice the growing gap between stones, didn't notice anything until it was too late. 6 hours into my escape attempt, I hit something unexpected, a hollow space behind the stone. Not a flaw, a design feature. Old smuggling tunnel maybe, or escape route built by paranoid ancestors. The gap was small, maybe 8 inches across when I finally broke through. Not enough for an adult, barely enough for a child. But I was slim, starved down to nothing from years of poverty and recent stress. I could fit if I tried, if I dislocated my shoulders, if I accepted the pain. I waited until the next guard change, used the noise and distraction, popped my left shoulder out of socket, suppressed the scream, then my right. The pain was blinding, stars exploded across my vision. But I fit, squeezed through the gap, into darkness that smelled like centuries and rats and forgotten history. The tunnel was tight, barely 2 feet wide. I crawled, shoulder joints screaming, darkness absolute, no idea where I was going, just away from the cell, away from execution. The tunnel branched. I went left, pure guess, crawled for what felt like hours. My hands were raw, my knees bleeding, my shoulders agony. Then light, faint. Ahead. I crawled faster. The tunnel opened into a cellar, abandoned, filled with rotting crates and ancient wine barrels. I relocated my shoulders. The pain was worse than dislocating them, but I needed arms that worked, needed to be functional. Above me I could hear voices, footsteps, the sounds of city life continuing while I'd been buried alive. I found stairs, climbed, emerged into an alley behind what looked like a tavern. Night had fallen. The city was under curfew. Brennan's soldiers patrolled streets. I needed allies, needed people who'd fight back, needed to reach the one group Brennan couldn't control. The civilians. I found Thea first, the servant who'd cared for me when I first arrived. She lived in the residential quarter, small apartment, shared with 3 other palace staff. She opened the door, saw me, covered in filth and blood and desperation, didn't hesitate, pulled me inside. What happened? I told her. The coup, the arrest, the planned execution, Brennan's control of the guard. He controls the military, she said quietly, but not us, not the servants, not the merchants, not the people who actually keep this city running. Can you spread word, get people organized? I can try, she looked at me. What's the plan? Brennan controls the guard, 200 trained warriors. We can't fight them directly. I thought fast. Strategic thinking. What were his weaknesses? But they need to eat, need to sleep, need the cooperation of the civilian population to function. We withdraw that cooperation. Strike? Thea smiled. I like it. Not just strike. Active resistance. The servants poison guard barracks, non-lethal, enough to incapacitate. The merchants cut off food supplies. The militia creates diversions. And I find Dante. Dante's imprisoned too. Brennan arrested him first. Then we break him out. And we end this before Kale returns to find his city under enemy control. The network spread faster than I'd hoped. Servants talked to merchants. Merchants talked to craftsmen. Craftsmen talked to militia members. Within hours, the city's civilian population knew what was happening, knew that Lord Commander Brennan had staged a coup, had arrested the king's mate, planned execution at dawn. They were angry, the kind of angry that came from being used, manipulated, told to sacrifice while nobles played power games. They struck at midnight, coordinated, simultaneous. The servants in the guard barracks added concentrated sleeping herbs to the evening meal. 3/4 of Brennan's force went down hard, not dead, just unconscious. Would wake up with splitting headaches and no one to blame but themselves for not checking their food. The merchants cut supply lines. No food delivery to guard posts. No water carriers, no fuel for fires. Every service that kept the military functioning stopped. The militia created chaos, false alarms, staged fights, anything to draw the remaining guards away from key positions. And I went after Dante. He was held in the same cell block I'd escaped from. Different cell, better guarded. But the guards were few. Brennan hadn't expected civilian resistance, hadn't planned for the people he'd dismissed as irrelevant. I had 20 militia fighters, poorly armed but motivated. We hit the cell block hard, fast, overwhelming the 4 guards before they could raise alarm. Dante was conscious, barely. They'd beaten him, trying to get information about Kale's plans. His leg wound had reopened. Blood soaked his pants. Arya? His voice was rough. How did you? Escaped, organized resistance. Now we're ending this. I broke his cell door. Not elegant, just brute force applied to old iron. Can you walk? I can move. He leaned on me. Where's Brennan? Command center, holding it with maybe 50 guards. The rest are incapacitated or scattered. Then we finish it. The assault on the command center was ugly. Not tactical, not clean. Just 300 angry civilians and 20 militia fighters hitting 50 professional soldiers who hadn't expected organized resistance. We lost people. The baker who'd rented us our room took a sword through the chest. The textile supervisor who'd watched me work 14-hour shifts died holding the door so others could advance. But we won. Numbers and fury and the righteousness of people defending their city against someone who'd betrayed it. We found Brennan in the war room, surrounded by maps and plans and the evidence of his coordination with Eastern Valley. He had Lyra, Kale's sister, hostage, knife to her throat. "Back away," he ordered, "or she dies." I looked at him, at the knife, at Lyra's terrified face, calculated distances, probabilities, outcomes. "You want to negotiate?" I asked. "I want safe passage, exile, my life in exchange for hers." "No." I kept my voice calm. "You want me to choose between saving Lyra and maintaining order. You think I'm sentimental, weak, that I'll trade justice for one life. Aren't you? I'm practical." I raised the crossbow Dante had given me. "That knife is at her throat, but your hand is shaking. You're scared, desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." "I'm not making mistakes. You already did. You assumed civilians were irrelevant, that servants and merchants and workers didn't matter, that the only power that counted was military power." I aimed, steady, breathing the way Dante had taught. "But cities don't run on soldiers. They run on people who grow food and cook meals and weave cloth and do all the invisible work you never noticed. You won't shoot. You might hit her." "I might," I agreed. "But I've been working textiles since I was 7. My hands are very steady, and you're a bigger target than you think." I pulled the trigger. The bolt took him through the right eye, punched through socket and brain and out the back of his skull. He dropped, instantly dead. The knife clattered harmlessly away from Lyra's throat. She collapsed. I caught her, held her while she shook. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "You saved me. You saved all of us." "Maybe, but I'd also killed a man in cold blood. Shot him through the eye while he held a hostage. That wasn't defense. That was execution. Calculated, precise, necessary. It still felt like murder." Dante found me later. I was sitting in the command center, surrounded by Brennan's maps and plans, evidence of his conspiracy, proof he'd been coordinating with Valen, planning to hand over the city in exchange for position and power. "You did what you had to do," Dante said quietly. "The shot was clean, professional. You saved Lyra." "I killed a man without trial, without council approval, without anything except my judgment that he needed to die." "Welcome to command." Dante sat beside me, his legs stretched awkwardly. "Every leader makes that call eventually. The call that keeps them awake at night, the call they can't delegate or avoid or pretend someone else made. Does it get easier? No. But you learn to live with it. Learn that sometimes mercy to one person is cruelty to thousands." He pointed to Brennan's correspondence. "He would have opened the gates, let Valen walk in. Thousands would have died. You prevented that. The cost was one traitor's life and your peace of mind. That's a trade most commanders would make." I wanted to believe him, wanted to think I'd done the right thing. But Brennan's dead eye stared at me from across the room, accusation written in cooling blood. Kael returned 3 days later, victorious. His field army had broken Valen's eastern flank, killed 800 warriors, destroyed supply depots, forced a tactical withdrawal. But victory turned hollow when he learned about the coup, about Brennan's betrayal, about the civilians who died fighting back, about me executing a nobleman without trial. He found me on the walls, looking out at Valen's diminished camp. They'd pulled back 2 miles, reorganizing, reassessing. The siege continued, but pressure had eased. "I should have been here," he said. "You were where you needed to be, winning the battle." I didn't look at him. I did what I had to do, what you trained me to do, make the hard calls. Killing Brennan was the right choice. Was it? I turned. He was a traitor, a conspirator, guilty of everything we suspected, but I didn't give him trial, didn't give him a chance to defend himself, just shot him because tactically it made sense. He was holding Lyra hostage. I know, that's what makes it right tactically, but it doesn't make it feel right. I touched the pendant through my shirt. My mother taught me kindness, but kindness doesn't hold cities, doesn't stop coups. I'm becoming something she wouldn't recognize. You're becoming a leader. Kael pulled me close. Leaders make impossible choices. That's the job, the cost. He kissed my forehead. But you don't make them alone, not anymore. We carry the weight together. We stood like that while below us the city slowly recovered, while civilians buried their dead and Dante interrogated Brennan's co-conspirators and Marcus reorganized defenses. A week later, everything changed. Valen's messenger arrived under white flag, requesting parley, offering ceasefire terms. Kael brought me to the negotiation, along with Marcus and Dante and what remained of our council. Valen himself attended, 50 years old, silver-haired, the kind of handsome that came from wealth and privilege and never missing meals. He looked at our reduced forces and damaged walls and exhausted defenders with cool assessment. "You fought well," he said without preamble. "Better than expected. But we both know how this ends. I have resources, reinforcements, time. You have casualties and depleting supplies and a civilian population near breaking." "We have allies," Kale replied. "Southern Coast sent 500 warriors. They'll send more." "Will they? Or will they see a losing cause and cut their losses?" Valen smiled. "I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to offer terms, reasonable terms, a way to end this without more bloodshed." "What terms?" "Ceasefire, peace treaty, trade agreements favorable to both kingdoms." Valen's eyes found me. "But Northern Peaks must provide stability, leadership that prioritizes kingdom over personal entanglement. You must set aside your mate, marry my daughter Seraphine, create the alliance your father would have made." Silence, heavy, absolute. "No," Kale said flatly. "Think about it," Valen pressed. "We both lose warriors daily. Both spend resources we'll need for other threats. The human kingdoms are watching, waiting for us to weaken each other enough that they can move against us both. This war serves neither of our interests. Then withdraw your forces. And gain nothing? No." Valen leaned forward. "You keep your kingdom, your throne, your pride. You marry Seraphine for political alliance. And the lowborn girl goes back to whatever hovel she came from. Everyone gets what matters. Everyone survives." "She matters," Kale said, but his voice was tight, strained. "Does she matter more than your kingdom? More than the 2,000 warriors who'll die if this continues? More than the civilians starving behind your walls?" Valen's tone was almost gentle. "I'm asking you to choose. Love or duty? Your heart or your people? What kind of king are you?" I looked at KL, saw the agony in his eyes, the impossible math, personal happiness versus collective survival, the choice every leader eventually faced. "Take the deal," I said quietly. "Arya, take it." I made my voice firm. "He's right. This war is destroying both kingdoms, making us vulnerable to real threats. If setting me aside ends it, if political marriage brings peace, then that's what you do. I won't trade you for peace." "You're not trading me. You're choosing your people. That's what kings do." I touched his hand. Brief. "I'll survive. I always do. But Northern Peaks needs you alive, needs this war ended, needs stability." "Very noble," Valen said, "but unnecessary. I don't actually need the girl removed, just subordinated. Seraphine becomes queen. The low-born mate can be kept as mistress. Quietly, privately. No one needs to know." "That's generous," Dante said. His voice dripped sarcasm. "That's practical. I don't care about the king's bedroom politics. I care about trade routes and resource access and the appearance of proper alliance." Valen stood. "You have until tomorrow. Accept the terms or we resume the siege. Next time with fresh troops and siege engines that will crack these walls like eggs." After he left, we sat in heavy silence. The offer hung between us. Reasonable, pragmatic, everything a good treaty should be. "I won't do it," Kale said finally. "I won't set you aside. Won't make you a secret shame hidden in shadows. Even if it saves thousands of lives? Even then." He looked at me. "Some prices are too high. Some compromises destroy what you're trying to save. We find another way." "There might not be another way." "Then we make one." He turned to Dante. "The intelligence Brennan provided, Valen's correspondence. What did it say about internal opposition?" "Significant resistance among Eastern Valley nobles. Many oppose this war. See it as Valen's personal ambition rather than national interest." Dante pulled documents. 3 major houses. Could be turned if given reason. "What reason?" "Proof that Valen is weakening Eastern Valley, bleeding resources for no gain, making them vulnerable to outside threats." I studied the reports. If we publicize his losses, his failed siege, the fact that he's negotiating from weakness, not strength, it undermines his position at home. "That's espionage, propaganda." Marcus frowned. "Risky. So is everything else." I looked at KL. "We don't have to beat Valen militarily. We have to beat him politically. Make his own people question whether this war serves their interests." It took 2 days to prepare. We used Brennan's spy network, the contacts he'd maintained, the channels he'd used to communicate with Eastern Valley. We sent detailed casualty reports, evidence of Valen's stalled siege, proof he was negotiating because he couldn't win militarily. Everything designed to make Eastern Valley nobles question their leader's judgment. The effect was faster than expected. Within a week, Valen's camp showed signs of internal discord. Arguments between commanders, reduced patrol efficiency, the kind of breakdown that came from questioning orders. 2 weeks after the ceasefire offer, Valen's position collapsed. Not militarily, politically. 3 major houses issued formal letters questioning the war's necessity, demanding immediate withdrawal, threatening to recall their forces if he didn't comply. Valen tried to hold, to push forward anyway, but an army fighting against internal opposition is an army already defeated. His forces began withdrawing, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. The siege ended not with dramatic battle but with quiet retreat, Valen's forces returning to Eastern Valley, leaving behind destroyed siege equipment and the bodies of 1,000 warriors who died for a political gambit that failed. We'd won, not through superior force or brilliant tactics, but through persistence and propaganda and the understanding that wars were as much political as military. The cost was still staggering. 800 Northern Peaks warriors dead, 1,200 wounded, civilians casualties from the coup, a damaged city, a collapsed trade route, economic damage that would take years to repair. But we'd survived. That had to be enough. The coronation was scheduled for spring equinox, 6 months after the war ended. Time to rebuild, to heal, to prepare for the ceremony that would make official what everyone already knew. I was going to be queen, the low-born textile worker who'd noticed wrong pouring techniques and followed money trails and shot traitors through the eye. Queen of Northern Peaks, mate to Kale North Raven, partner in leadership. The ceremony was held in the same hall where the mating ritual had happened. Full circle, poetic maybe, or just practical use of existing infrastructure. I wore white. Lyra had designed the dress. Simple, elegant, no pretension, just good fabric well fitted. The wolf pendant hung at my throat. Visible, acknowledged. A reminder of where I'd come from. The crowd was larger than I'd expected. Nobles from every pack, Southern Coast allies, even a few Eastern Valley representatives. Valen had died 3 months earlier, natural causes supposedly. His daughter now ruled. She'd sent formal apology for the war, requested renewed trade relations. Politics moved fast when it suited everyone involved. Kale stood at the front, wearing his ceremonial armor, black steel, inscribed with victories and losses. The armor of a king who'd earned his throne through blood and strategy and the willingness to make hard choices. The coronation ceremony was traditional. Elder Marcus spoke the words. Marcus had taken Thomas's place on the council, wore his authority uneasily but wore it nonetheless. "Do you accept the crown?" Marcus asked me. "The burden and privilege of leadership? The duty to serve your people above personal interest?" "I do." My voice carried, clear, certain. I'd learned how to project, how to command attention, how to be heard. The crown was lighter than expected, silver wrought with wolf designs. It settled on my head like it belonged there. "Queen Arya Wren North Raven," Marcus announced, "mate to the king, defender of the realm, leader of her people." The crowd erupted. Cheers from the common folk who remembered how I'd organized resistance during the coup. More measured applause from nobles who still questioned my bloodlines but couldn't question my competence. That's when the doors burst open. Human delegation, unexpected, unannounced. 20 warriors in foreign armor with weapons that gleamed silver and cruel. Their leader stepped forward. Ambassador maybe, or general. Hard to tell with humans. "Northern Peaks," he said loudly. "We watched your war with Eastern Valley, watched you tear each other apart, weaken yourselves, make yourselves vulnerable." Tension flooded the hall. Guards moved to intercept. Kale's hand went to his sword. "We come with offer," the human continued. "Alliance against Eastern Valley. We help you destroy them, split their territory, share the spoils." It was tempting, viciously tempting. Valen was dead, but Eastern Valley remained powerful. A threat, an enemy that might strike again. Every tactical bone in my body said to consider it, to use human strength against wolf enemies, to secure our borders through alliance. But I thought about Elder Thomas, about his last words, about serving the kingdom, not just surviving it. "No," I said before Kale could respond. The human turned to me. "You speak for your king?" "I speak as queen." I moved forward, crown still settling on my head. "We just survived a war, lost 800 warriors, damaged our economy, traumatized our people. We won't start another war for conquest, won't become the aggressor we just defended against." "You would refuse alliance?" "I refuse opportunistic aggression disguised as alliance." I met his eyes. Eastern Valley sued for peace, withdrew, apologized. We accepted. That's not weakness. That's the strength to choose peace when war would be easier. Easier for who? For everyone except the warriors who die, the civilians who starve, the families who lose fathers and sons and brothers. I gestured to the crowd. Every person here knows someone who died in the last war. We won't dishonor them by starting another one. The human studied me. "You're very young to speak of war's cost." "I'm old enough to have seen it, to have counted casualties, to have made the calls that sent people to die." My voice hardened. Old enough to know that peace is harder than war, requires more courage, more vision, more willingness to be called weak by people who measure strength in body counts. Silence. The hall waited. Then the human smiled. "When you're ready to talk, when you've rebuilt, when you want alliance built on respect, not opportunism, we'll listen." He bowed slightly. "Congratulations on your coronation, Queen Arya. May you rule long and wise." They left, taking their offer with them, leaving behind the knowledge that human kingdoms were watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment to make their move. But today wasn't that moment. Today was about coronation, about celebration, about acknowledging what we'd built through blood and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to break. The ceremony continued, formal oaths, traditional songs, everything precisely choreographed. I accepted the crown, accepted the burden, accepted the future we'd fought to build. 5 years later, the kingdom had transformed, not into perfection, that was fairy tale thinking, but into something functional, something sustainable. The trade routes were rebuilt, different routes, more expensive, but functioning. The economy recovered, slowly, with setbacks and struggles and the kind of grinding effort that doesn't make good stories. The civilian programs I'd started continued, councils where regular people could voice concerns, programs for struggling families, integration of common folk into governance. It wasn't revolutionary, just practical, listening to people who understood street-level problems. Marcus had twins, boy and girl. Sarah joked they'd inherited their father's tactical mind and her fighting spirit, a dangerous combination. Dante still walked with a cane, still commanded security, still had nightmares about the past collapse, but he'd found purpose in training the next generation, teaching them that survival mattered more than glory. Lyra had married her scholar, built a library in Elder Thomas's memory. It became renowned throughout the kingdoms, a place where knowledge mattered more than bloodlines. My mother lived in the palace, healthier than she'd been in years, still not fully recovered, never would be, but alive, present, able to see her daughter become queen. Kale and I had a son, 2 years old, dark hair like his father, blue eyes like mine. He was too young to understand what his parents had survived to give him a stable kingdom. Someday we'd tell him. Someday he'd understand. But not today. Today he played in the gardens while we handled the endless work of governance, trade disputes, border negotiations, internal politics. The same issues that had existed before the war and would exist after we were gone. The human kingdoms had made good on their promise, sent ambassadors, proposed alliance. We'd negotiated carefully, built relationship on mutual respect rather than exploitation. It was working, slowly, with the kind of diplomatic patience that took years to bear fruit. Eastern Valley maintained uneasy peace. Valen's daughter was a better ruler than her father, more interested in internal development than external conquest. We traded, carefully, with terms that protected both sides. It wasn't perfect. Some nobles still questioned my bloodlines, still whispered about the low-born queen, still thought bloodlines mattered more than competence. But I'd proven myself, through crisis management and tactical thinking and the willingness to make calls that kept me awake at night, earned respect one decision at a time. The pendant hung at my throat, worn smooth by 5 years of constant wear, my mother's grandmother's legacy, a reminder that I came from a long line of survivors, women who'd faced impossible odds and refused to break. I was queen, Not because destiny chose me, not because some god decided I was special, but because I'd worked for it, learned, adapted, made myself into someone capable of the role. That was the truth I'd learned. Not magic, not fate, just competence built through effort and the refusal to quit when quitting seemed smarter. Kale found me in the library. I was reviewing budget proposals, endless, necessary, the work that actually kept kingdoms running. "Still working?" he asked. "Always working. That's the job." I set down the papers. "The southern border needs reinforcement. Nothing urgent, just maintenance. Dante will handle it." He pulled me up. "Come to bed. The kingdom will still be here tomorrow." "Will it?" I smiled. "Some days I'm not sure." "It will, because we make it work, every day, together." He kissed me. "That's enough." Was it? I didn't know, but it was what we had, what we'd built, what we'd keep building for however long we had. Queenship didn't end with coronation, didn't end with victory or peace or any single moment. It continued, daily, in small decisions and large, in the work of making a kingdom function despite all the reasons it shouldn't. That was real leadership, not the dramatic moments, not the grand gestures, just the daily grind of trying to do better than yesterday, of making choices that helped more than they hurt, of surviving long enough to see your efforts matter. We walked through this palace together, past guards who nodded respect, past servants who smiled, past the evidence of what we'd built through blood and sacrifice and the stubborn belief that competence mattered more than destiny. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new crises, new impossible choices. But tonight, we had peace. Hard-earned, dearly bought, precious because we knew exactly what it cost. That was enough. It had to be, because it was all we had, and somehow we'd made it into something worth fighting for. Together. Always together. Because that was the only way to survive what the world threw at us. The low-born queen and the scarred king, partners in leadership, bound not by fate but by choice. The choice to stand, to fight, to lead. And most importantly, the choice to keep standing when falling seemed easier. Every scar had been worth it, every sacrifice, every impossible choice, because we'd built something real, something that would outlast us. And that was enough.